going on, everybody? Welcome to the NFL Betting Show here live on our FTN YouTube page. Chris Meaney, Sam Choudhury, and Dane Martinez here with you for the next little bit, breaking down everything from week 4 in the National Football League. We're going to talk our favorite picks, our props, and we'll round out the show with a dog or two and a survivor play because ever since week 1, dogs have been alive. They have been hitting. Sam, remember when you were on the show last week, or last time, I think it was week 2, and we brought up the board. We're like, what's a dog we can go after? And I think we named 5 or 6. Just like they all hit.
Yeah.
And then last week, Sam, they've all hit again. Like it's been a crazy start to the NFL, sure.
Yeah, I mean, Survivors has to be brutal. I think I think it was like 90%. I mean, we're in week 4 right now, and like 90% of the pool is eliminated. I mean, it's nice. I mean, I love seeing parity in the game, but what a wild season.
Dane, any takeaways through 3 weeks of the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, one of the things I'm thinking from a fantasy standpoint also is, scoring is down, passing is down. I think it's 2 big things, right? We all talk about the too high safety look, forcing teams to kind of dink and dunk their way down the field. But the other thing is our guy, Alex Blickel, really put out a stat that I thought was interesting. Last year, the Pittsburgh Steelers were the best pass rush in the league, averaging 2.1 seconds to pressure. This year, something like 6 or 7 teams are less than 2 seconds to pressure. And honestly, I think it's because of that point of emphasis that the tackles have to really line up. They can't get that extra little foot or two. You saw in the season opener, the Ravens get called on it like 3 times in the opening drive. I actually think that with the tackles kind of actually on the line of scrimmage, it gives these edge rushing athletes a little bit of an advantage, and they're putting heat on the quarterback, and that has a huge impact, pressure burst pipes. And that's something that is not going to change because it is a point of emphasis for the league. The question is, how do we as the fantasy and betting community adjust?
Yeah, it's been an interesting start. A lot of too high. Quarterbacks are certainly struggling. Passing yards are down and points are down too. Like we started week 1 low in terms of points per game, and it's decreased over the past couple of weeks. But let's get into week 4. We'll start with you, Sam. What's on your card? Give us a pick.
Yeah, I'll start with the prop here first. I'm going to go with George Pickens. This is sort of a parlay. As a standalone, the 3.5 receptions, it was heavily juiced, minus 150, minus 155. So sometimes you look at these books like Bet365, it doesn't dock you on taking a positively correlated play, which is what I'm doing right here with the over 3.5 receptions, 25 plus yards. I mean, if I think Pickens is gonna catch at least 4 balls, he almost has to go backwards not to get 25 plus receiving yards. So this is one that I like at minus 130. Still fine paying that juice, but what we've seen through the first 3 games, I mean, the offense, they've been pretty conservative. You were talking about Pittsburgh earlier with the stat about their pressure rate, but they're also bottom of the league in touchdowns, and they're 3-0. I mean, they're bottom of the league with teams like Miami, New England, these teams that are 1-2, but you're seeing their defense really win out. But regardless, Justin Fields has been playing really well. He's pretty much done what he's needed to. He has been more conservative both through the air and with his legs, but what we've seen with George Pickens is, I mean, he's far and away the alpha on the team. He leads the team with a 22.2% target share, 48.1% air yard share. Through 3 games, he's averaging a little over 4 receptions, 4.3 on 6 targets and 57 yards. Again, a lot of these games have been conservative. They haven't really been pushed, but he has 7 plus targets and 5 plus receptions and 57 yards in 2 out of 3 games. We saw Justin Fields finally have a really good day as a passer last week, and now he faces a Colts secondary that's bottom 12 in DVOA against the pass at 9.1%. And they've allowed the 7th most receptions and 9th most receiving yards to opposing wide receivers. Van Jefferson hasn't done much, but he was the clear other number 2 with George Pickens. He's banged up. I think Jalen Warren is going to miss. Najee Harris came out with a sling, but he said he's going to play. I mean, this guy hasn't missed a game, but there's no way he's going to be 100%. And we're seeing the spread, which kind of surprises me. Pittsburgh only a minus 1.5 favorite against a Colts team that had been struggling. So I think they are going to have to pass it. I think they would like to run as much as they can, but when they pass it, it's really only going to George Pickens. So, I mean, 3.5 receptions, 25 plus yards. I think he can get that at the half, even if they end up going up big.
Yeah, I even like the 47.5 for Pickens is something that I bet myself. And, he's a big play guy. He's cleared that number in 2 of the 3 games. The one game he didn't, he had to deal with Patrick Surtain, but he led the NFL in yards per catch last season. He can, this, Sam, and that's part of the pick that even though you've teased down here a little bit, I mean, he could get to 48 receiving yards and like 2 grabs. I'm pretty impressed with the Steelers. Obviously, the defense is great. They haven't had a lot of tough matchups, but the defense is phenomenal. It's going to keep them in a majority of football games, and I really like them this week as well. I've been taking them on the money line, a little bit of juice the past couple of weeks around minus 140. I'm seeing right now, and by the way, the prop shop, the parlay calculator, tools that are free. You can see the link inside the description of this video. Even them being on the road at minus 122 is certainly appealing for me. I've been looking for some Najee Harris props. Not going to see them yet. Do expect them to play, like you said, Sam. And Warren's season could be lost. It's a week-to-week injury for him, so they'll have to adjust moving forward. But I would take anything on Najee if he's like 17.5, 18.5 rushing attempts. May seem high, but they're going to lean on him. They already have. They're going to lean on him moving forward. Let's stick inside that same game, Dane, because you have a prop inside that game as well. We're going to pick on Anthony Richardson here a little bit. Oof.
Yeah. And Meaney, more than almost anybody, going into this season, I was all over Anthony Richardson for fantasy purposes. I thought the rushing floor that was there from what we saw in the 4 games last year with all of the touchdowns and all the running, but he is obviously still raw as a passer, right? I mean, he has a 49.3 completion percentage. Guys, that's 34th in the NFL. There's 32 teams in the NFL, so he's even lower than that, right? And the other thing is, the way they play is it's deep down the field. I look over at Stats Hub, right? And check this out. Alec Pierce is number 1 in depth of target, and A.D. Mitchell is 3rd in the NFL in depth of target at 20.8. So they consciously try to push the ball downfield, keep those safeties deep, right? Because that helps the Anthony Richardson and the Jonathan Taylor run game. So the thing is, Anthony Richardson has not been efficient. He hasn't made a ton of completions, and I don't think he's going to do it against a Pittsburgh Steelers defense that is good against the pass. They allow only a 61% completion percentage. That's the 7th lowest in the NFL. Anthony Richardson has gone under this number of 15.5 completions in 2 of the 3 games. The one time he went over it, he had 17 completions. I just don't think the stars are going to align here for Anthony Richardson, so I'm going under 15.5. He hasn't really done this, and now he gets a really tough Steelers defense, who are quite frankly the reason that they are 3-0. So give me under on Anthony Richardson. But I know guys like Sam love that kind of negative or positive correlation, right? So I also think he could go under this, but if you're looking at his longest completion prop, that's pretty high. It's in the low 30s. But again, he has been throwing bombs. So I do think there's a universe where he doesn't complete a ton of passes, but the one he does goes over the top and could even hit that longest completion in the low 30s. So check that out. If it gives you a little bit of an extra boost, go on over to the same game calculator, a great tool over at FTN. But I don't think Anthony Richardson is going to carve up this Steelers defense when he can't even complete half of his passes. If anything, they are going to try to run the ball, punch Pittsburgh in the mouth, and, slow this game down and make it look ugly.
Yeah, the ADOT is extremely high, to your point, which doesn't help the completion rates. We know he can sling it. He's not... His strengths and Michael Pittman's strengths, they really don't match up. So the alpha wide receiver inside that offense hasn't had a good start to the season from a fantasy perspective. They're both sits for me. The Steelers have allowed the fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. They're like bottom 3 or 4 in terms of wide receivers as well. Sam, we'll just toss it to you first, since we're just on Richardson and the Steelers. What have you made from his game? And do you think that there's a possibility that the Colts say, you know what, fairly raw, let's put him on the sidelines? We see Joe Flacco under center. I saw Joe Flacco picked up in one of my super flex leagues this morning, and I was like, it is something that we talked about on Monday and Tuesday on the SiriusXM show, just kind of tongue in cheek. But what do you think the possibility is if Richardson continues to struggle?
Yeah, I don't really think there's a chance that we're going to see a Bryce Young type situation here, just because I think the kind of guy that Shane Steichen is like, he's going to let him go through it, take his lumps. And I mean, none of us expect this team to be a playoff contending team right now. So I think the best case for that team is they just sort of let Richardson gut it out. They knew coming in that he was going to be a raw prospect. And I think everything you guys said about Anthony Richardson, and you specifically, Chris, on how badly it's hurt Michael Pittman, the high ADOT throwing downfield. I mean, it's hurt Pittman the worst, and you consistently see his yardage far and away higher than the rest of the wide receivers. It really doesn't make any sense because he's not going to be the one guy to catch a deep ball and, hit his prop. So actually, this was around like 3:30 this morning. I gave out Pittman's under 49.5 receiving yards on ESPN Bet, and you guys made all the concerns for Anthony Richardson. On top of that, we saw Josh Downs come back, and in the same game, Josh Downs and Pittman both had the same target share. It was the first time Michael Pittman saw 5 or fewer targets in a game this season. And again, the Pittsburgh secondary, we talk about how great they are. He hasn't had more than 36 yards all season long. He just got that last week, and now they're hanging a 49.5 receiving prop. And we do have Joey Porter Jr. as his primary matchup, which is what I expect as well. So I think it's an easy under. And you talked about you liking George Pickens as well. On DraftKings, you can actually get a head-to-head Michael Pittman versus George Pickens. You can take Pickens minus 125 there, which is one that I like a lot too. So yeah, I think just fading this Colts offense this game is the way to go.
Yeah, I like that. The Pittman versus Pickens. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. So yeah, as Dane mentioned, he's got the league low 50% completion rate, and he also has a league high 6 interceptions so far. So it's a roller coaster ride, Colts fans. You're going to have to just, buckle up, right? Because you see the throw down the field to Alex Pierce, and you're like, damn, that was nice. And then they're in the red zone, like at the 5, and he throws that pick, and it's like, okay, that's an ugly toss. So yeah, maybe we won't see Joe Flacco, but it certainly would help out Michael Pittman. Just like as you alluded to, Sam, when we saw Andy Dalton under center, it certainly helped out Deontay Johnson. I gave this one earlier yesterday. It was 4.5 catches. It was minus 140, slightly juiced, but I was like, I'm fine with it. He's going to have 5 grabs, and I think he's going to get past 5.5 catches as well. So we've seen a little bit of movement on this number. 5.5 catches plus 115, and now 62.5 receiving yards. It was 60.5 when I chucked that in our FTN Discord channel yesterday, both at Bet365. So I don't think he's going to have 122 yards and 14 targets, but my goodness, he had a 36% target share in that game, and Adam Thielen is not going to play in this football game. So Deontay Johnson is alive again, thanks to the veteran quarterback in Dalton. And we all saw it on prime time. And I don't want to take too much away from Jaden Daniels because he was fantastic in that game. He had 2 incompletions. He had 3 total touchdowns. He had a 91% completion rate. The Bengals didn't show us anything defensively in that football game. So I think DJ will be relevant again. He caught 8 of those 14 targets that were thrown his way. So I am not going to overthink this. Deontay Johnson, 5.5 catches plus 115 last week. Guys, it was like 3.5 grabs and like 48.5 receiving yards. So it's jumped up here from last week to this week, but I don't think that these numbers are too high. So I'm going to go in on DJ. Let's toss back over to you, Sam, and I guess we'll stick inside the same game. You had this Chase Brown a couple weeks ago. The over rushing attempts, you're going back to him again here this week.
Yeah, it was I remember the last time giving it out 5.5 is what we got, which is, crazy looking back at it now. And still, this 25.5 number just seems way too low. On top of everything, usage aside, this is a Carolina defense that we have been picking on. Since last season, it's a completely different coaching staff, but we're still see them getting gashed on the ground. It was pretty disappointing day for the Raiders, specifically Zamir White. I thought he was in line for a big game, but obviously we saw the Raiders get down, sort of got game scripted out, couldn't get much going, but the Panthers still overall ranked 27th in DVOA against the rush at 2.4%. And they've allowed the 4th most carries and 5th most rushing yards to opposing backfields. And again, Chase Brown, we saw on Monday night, even in a trailing game script, Chase Brown hasn't really been playing on passing situations just because they still prefer Moss to be the pass blocker. So it's not really that Moss is playing ahead of Chase Brown on passing downs because he's the one running routes. It's more for him to stay in at block. Now we're seeing Cincinnati is still a favorite, sitting at -4. You are seeing some money coming to Carolina's side. So I am expecting a back and forth game, but I don't think we're going to see Burrow again throw for almost 400 yards. I think ideally they would like to be in a more balanced game script. I would still project a more positive game script. And I think Moss is definitely set up for a big day. And I do think that he is still going to have a stranglehold in the backfield in terms of snaps and rushes. But from what we see with Chase Brown, I mean, he only needs a handful of carries to clear this prop. Last game, he had 7 carries, which was a season high. He also had a season high in rushing share. He had 7 carries compared to 12 for Zach Moss. So we are seeing them get closer together. But again, like I said, he only needs maybe 3 to 4 carries to clear this. His rushing prop is 6.5. So if he gets anywhere close to 6, I think he goes over 25.5 pretty easily. He just averaged 8.6 yards per carry, again, on 7 carries last game. And now he gets just a great matchup against Carolina, which, again, like I said, I think is going to be a positive to neutral game script where, I mean, if Chase Brown continues to look this much better than Zach Moss, not to take anything away from Zach Moss, I do think they want to have Chase Brown out there to have some explosive plays on the ground as well.
Yeah, I like both of these guys. I mean, you mentioned Zach Moss too, right? He's coming off a season high in terms of total yards and opportunities for him. They're using both of these guys as like a change of pace type running back. Chase Brown looks like the better one. I think we can all agree. It's like last year with Najee and Warren. I don't think that Moss is going anywhere. I think he's like, I got him roughly as a top 15 back this week. You mentioned the DVOA 27th, and they've coughed up the 4th most fantasy points to running backs as well. So Moss's rushing props around 55.5. I think both of these guys get theirs, and like you said, lean on the ground game a little bit. We'll stick inside the same game. We can follow the trend here. Dane does believe that the Bengals are going to give up some points in this football game.
I absolutely do. Give me the Panthers team total over 21.5. Listen, we've been talking about the difference from Bryce Young over to Andy Dalton, and it's completely night and day. I mean, Andy Dalton had a 68% completion rate as to Bryce Young's 55%. Andy Dalton's throwing the ball downfield more, 8.4 yards per attempt, as opposed to 4.4 yards per attempt for Bryce Young. Andy Dalton in that one game, 3 touchdowns, no picks, 0 turnover-worthy throws, whereas in 2 games, Bryce Young had 4 turnover-worthy throws, no touchdowns, and 3 picks. Bryce Young scored 10 points. 3 points. Andy Dalton scored 36 points in that one game against the Vegas Raiders, right? So I don't know if the books have just completely adjusted or if the algorithm still, factors in the first 2 weeks of this Panthers offense when I think it is completely different. And then here's the deal. You mentioned it. They've got the Cincinnati Bengals this week, and that Bengals defense looked absolutely putrid, blunt guts trash against the Washington Commanders, right? Giving up 90% completion percentage, couldn't force a punt, couldn't get a turnover. The Cincinnati Bengals allow a 75% completion percentage against them. That is tied for the second worst in the NFL. But they also can't stop the run, okay? They allow a 49% success rate running the ball against them. That is also second worst in the NFL. So teams have been able to throw against them. Teams have been able to run against them. I think you're right. Cincy will score some points too. So I think this will be a little bit of a back and forth. And I think under the red rifle in a quote-unquote revenge game, I know Meaney and I have talked about this on the Sirius XM show, I think Andy Dalton and these Panthers, led by Deontay Johnson and Chuba Hubbard, will be able to get into the low 20s. And so over at Bet Rivers, it's only minus 103. I think the Panthers are going to continue to look like a different offense under Andy Dalton. I think they get to 22.
And Chuba looked different, right? Like unusable in fantasy. You don't even consider him in the prop game when Bryce Young is under center. But last week, 21 attempts, 114 yards in the ground. He caught 5 passes for 55 yards and had a receiving touchdown. He has 9 receptions in his last 2 games. And like, I look at his props and like, I'm not crazy about his running game. Like, I don't think he's a fantastic back. We're going to see Jonathan Brooks very soon, maybe next week. But I see his rushing yard prop and it's like 60. I see his rushing attempt prop and it's like 14.5. Doesn't it seem like, Sam, there's an edge there given the way that this Bengals rush defense has looked?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think Dane said it best. I like the team total because you're just betting on the offense as a whole, and it looked phenomenal night and day. And this is sort of what we expected from the Dave Canales offense. I mean, this was his quarterback guru. I mean, Bryce Young was the only guy he couldn't fix, but regardless, he's been a great play caller his whole career. And I mean, the whole offseason, they spent time adding pieces and depth to the offense, sort of building it up for Bryce Young. I mean, it didn't look great the first 2 weeks, but it looked phenomenal in Andy Dalton's first start. And in my heart of hearts, like living in Cincinnati, I think Andy Dalton is going to do everything to pour it on the Bengals. Like, I think he's going to go out there and like say what you will with the revenge game factor. I truly believe that this is going to be a spot that Dalton's going to want to show out. And I mean, he's a good quarterback. He always has been. Like, he's just been sort of middle of the pack. He's taken to the Bengals to multiple playoff appearances. So he definitely has what it takes. And I do think that we're seeing just sort of the 2023 version of Joe Flacco here, where he's just going to YOLO the ball and just make the entire offense viable. So, yeah, I like that team total one a lot.
Yeah, and I'm think I'm gonna put Chuba in at least maybe the attempts and the rushing yards for him. And I'm even looking at Xavier Legette, who with no Adam Thielen in the game, I mean, he had 2 catches for 42 yards. He's gonna be ramped up a little bit more in this game with no Thielen. And I'm looking at the prop shop right now, and I see over 2.5 catches minus 128 at FanDuel. Like I'm in on that number. And FanDuel's hanging 31.5 receiving yards at minus 114. Caesars is hanging 36.5 receiving yards at the same price. So we're seeing like a 5-yard difference, an edge there from FanDuel to Caesars. I'm immediately putting it in the bet tracker when I'm done the show. So anybody hanging out live, there you go. We'll get in on that because I think that number is going to change like once we get closer to kickoff on Sunday. So here we are. We're talking about the Carolina Panthers, and they're 4-point dogs since he hasn't won a game yet. So I don't know.
And that I want to say that opened at 5.5 too. So.
It did. It did. Yeah. So there's been a little bit of line movement. I'd say the Bengals win the game, but they haven't shown me a whole lot to make me want to put my money on the line.
Can you imagine if they
Bengals, 0-4?
Can you imagine if they don't and they go 0-4 with home losses to the Patriots and the Panthers, who both had the 2 lowest win totals in the NFL,
and the Commanders,
and then a home Monday Night Football primetime effort against Washington, right? Like if they go 0-4, you got to stick a fork in them, you would think, at least in that incredibly tough division of the AFC North. But I wonder if there's some other seats getting warm, if that's what happens as well.
And how poetic would it be for Dalton to put the dagger in their season too?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. 0-4 and potentially, and they haven't played anyone inside what I think is the toughest division in football, although Cleveland hasn't looked good. We're talking about the Bengals here, but still, it's very tough defenses and tough opponents there as well. Man, Andy Dalton is one of the better backups in the NFL. Like Miami would be wishing. Could you imagine if Miami had Dalton? We would be talking about them still, hanging around and being like a playoff contender. Instead, now they're going to Huntley as their 3rd string quarterback in Miami. So fun talk about revenge there. We'll keep it going. I don't believe that it's a thing. We had the fun debate on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. I'm sure Aaron Jones circled this matchup on his calendar as like the former Packer back at Lambeau. But it really is just about how he's run so far and how the Packers have struggled on the ground. So 90-plus rushing yards for Aaron Jones in 2 of his 3 games. He's averaging over 100 total yards on the season. The Packers have allowed the 5th most receiving yards to backs, too. Aaron Jones very much involved in third down situations. Ty Chandler's getting in there a little bit, but 12 catches for Aaron Jones in the 3 games as well. And the Packers have allowed 2 100-yard rushers. So Aaron Jones, we have an edge in our projections. We have Aaron Jones in the 60s, and we have Aaron Jones, I think, at 14.8 rushing attempts. He's been over this number in 2 of the 3. Didn't need him in that second game to run the rock there. So I like Aaron Jones to be a part of the offense here. We'll see about Jordan Love on the other side. If he's going to play with the Packers, it does seem that way. Right now, this Vikings team, I'm not buying. I tell you what, I'm not buying that they're 3-0. I am buying Brian Flores as a defensive coordinator and what he can do to opposing quarterbacks. It's back-to-back weeks now. Brock Purdy made him look extremely silly. And last week, CJ Stroud struggled, like throwing picks. Accuracy was off. It's just not something we've seen from CJ Stroud since he entered the league. So he could, put his team into some situations to have success on the road. Love's first game. So I'm going to take Aaron Jones here over 56.5 rushing yards and over 13.5 rushing attempts. Let's toss it back over to you, Sam. Let's head to San Fran. What do you got here with the Niners against the Patriots? 10-point faves here.
Yeah, honestly, I was just trying to find any way I could bet on the Niners without paying massive juice. And this is sort of what I landed on. these quarter time, full time ones are really good one. It's taking a single line, but it's pretty essentially a parlay when you think about it, when you take the quarter full time prop. So, I mean, it's just a simple math thing. They're 10-point to 10.5 favorites against the Pats. You look at just the first quarter money line alone, they're minus 285 to win the first quarter, minus 550. So some places are getting closer to minus 600 to win the game. So I think they win the first quarter. I think they dominate the game. So this is sort of a good way to bet on both. Even you look at the spread, it's minus 2.5 on DraftKings, minus 2.5 to win the first quarter, and at 49ers, minus 135 to cover. So it seems like a no-brainer. I don't really have to go in depth, but it's pretty obvious that from what we saw the Pats in week one, we were just bagging on Cincy. I mean, are we that impressed that New England was able to beat Cincy week one? That's probably the only reason you get a line like this. You'd probably be having to pay more juice if they didn't at least pick up that one win. So I think this Patriots team is what we expected coming into the season. I mean, I think we're going to see Drake May soon. Maybe we see him in this game, which I don't know. Maybe I like the 49ers side even better against a rookie there. But regardless, I think they control this game start to finish. Now we're seeing that even George Kittle could come back. But Brandon Ayuk, all pro, Juwan Jennings, I don't care if that's all they have. I mean, they're going to hand the rock to Jordan Mason 20-plus times. Brock Purdy looked phenomenal without his weapons last week. I mean, they lost the game, but Purdy just looked great. I mean, I don't know how this guy continues to get overrated. Like, he plays like a top-end quarterback, and people still aren't buying into it, but I love Brock Purdy. I think he's going to dominate this Patriots defense. And, yeah, I mean, you look at the Patriots as a whole, they ranked 23rd in team DVOA and 26 on defense. That was another thing that I thought maybe their defense could somewhat stay into games, but their defense has been even worse than their offense. So, I mean, both sides of the ball, 49ers should dominate. I don't care if it's going to be Jacoby, Drake May, but yeah, I mean, minus 125, I think, is a great price to win the quarter full game.
Yeah, when they traded Matthew Judon away, it's like, all right. They're kind of throwing in the towel here, even defensively. So I do like that call. Juwan Jennings does lead the NFL in yards per route run. All of a sudden, he's got the second most fantasy points at the wide receiver position. And one thing about Brock Purdy, he did it in that game without Debo. And there's been a lot of questions. Can he do it without Debo? And Trent Williams went down in that game as well, and he was still able to have some success. So I'm with you. They should have no issues. And I see Juwan Jennings, rather, at 47.5 receiving yards. And, like, he'll probably do that. He's not going to have the same type of volume and same type of game. As you mentioned, they should be able to just have success running the football. But it just takes a couple grabs. Like, his longest reception props at 20. Right. So it really does just take a couple grabs for him to get there. He's a great route runner, and he does seem to show up when Debo is not around. Even with George Kittle, I still like him as a wide receiver 3 in fantasy. Let's keep things moving. Dane, let's give some love to James Conner.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on James Conner this week. Remember, in that Monday night game, right? All the talk is about Jaden Daniels, and rightfully so, right? I just talked about it. No turnovers, no punts, but Cincinnati didn't turn the ball over either. Cincinnati didn't have to punt either. And that's because that Washington defense was not looking that good. Sam was talking about Chase Brown and Zach Moss earlier. They both gashed the Commanders in the run game. In fact, the Commanders have the third worst run defense in terms of yards per carry allowed, over 5 yards per carry they're giving up. And an NFL worst, this is one of our Stats Hub stats, 3.4 yards before contact the Commanders are giving up, right? So, like, their defensive line is not what we thought it was. It's high paid, but it's not doing what it's supposed to. Teams are able to open up holes. Teams are able to run against the Commanders. Then you look at Arizona on the other side. Arizona over 5 yards a carry. That's 5th in the NFL. The Arizona Cardinals, 26% avoided tackle rate. That's 6th in the NFL. Conner himself is 30% in terms of avoiding tackles. And the Arizona Cardinals are also pretty high, top 6 in the league in terms of quote unquote explosive runs. They've had 13 runs of 10 or more yards. 15% of their runs go for 10 or more yards. So I think Conner will be able to continue this trend. He will be able to gash the Washington Commanders defense. And I like his rushing prop over 68.5 yards. Conner, I think, is one of the under-respected kind of backs in the NFL. And I know this sounds silly, but Arizona may want to run the ball more to keep Jaden Daniels and that efficient Commanders offense off the field. How's that for a sentence you didn't think you'd hear come out of my mouth about a month ago, right? But I think the run defense for Washington, the run offense for the Cardinals, and James Conner specifically with a 30% avoided tackle rate, it equals to him getting to at least 69. You can get it at the standard juice of -110 over at Bet365.
Yeah, one of the most underrated backs in football. We were talking about him all offseason, right? Fantasy points per game over the last 2 years, RB10, RB11, coming off his first 1,000-yard season, 5 yards per pop. As long as he's healthy, he's great. Last week was a tough matchup for him against Detroit. Love the bounce back spot. If you own him in fantasy, don't worry about him. Roll him out. Take the over on the 68.5 rushing yard. I was looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. somewhere trying to find some numbers. I think we're just waiting on Trey McBride, not practicing again today due to a concussion. Doesn't look good for him. The past 2 weeks, there have been two guys that it's been Marvin Harrison Jr. He's got the 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks, and Chris Godwin, who's a touchdown in every game. Both of those guys continue to be plus money. Godwin's around plus 185. So I will be hammering any receiving yard prop for Marvin Harrison Jr. among the leaders in ADOT. Yards after the catch, we saw, I think we talked about it a couple weeks ago when we gave his receiving yard prop. It may have been last week. The second touchdown that he had in game number 2, that you can see on full display what he can do with the ball in his hand. So the ADOT is high. The target share is high over the past couple weeks, so we'll take a look at Marvin Harrison Jr. as well inside that same game. One more for me, and then we'll throw back over to you, Dane, to wrap it up, and then we'll get some dogs and survivor plays. So Darnell Mooney for me here at over 38.5. I think he makes for an interesting dart throw too in flex leagues. If you need a wide receiver with all of the injuries. Week 1 was a disaster. It was a disaster for everybody in the Atlanta offense, right? Kirk Cousins over the last couple of weeks been playing more under center as opposed to pistol in that Week 1 performance. So he's looked a little bit more comfortable. They have struggled in the red zone, but Mooney over the last 2 games, 15 targets, 154 yards, and he has a touchdown. It's another kind of deep threat guy, high ADOT, just takes a couple grabs for him to get to this number. So not too much analysis besides him being involved in the offense more so than Kyle Pitts, right? Thinking into the season heading in that it would be like a 1A, 1B between London and Pitts is just not the case. Pitts has had some moments. London's been good over the past 2 weeks, but Mooney's very much involved in this offense, and it's been much better for Kirk Cousins and company. Should be a fun game. Between Atlanta and New Orleans, a divisional matchup there between those two squads. So going into Darnell Mooney. And you have one more here. Dane, let's wrap it up with the Texans over the Jags. My goodness, Jacksonville. Doug Peterson's a guy that's on the hot seat, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you guys also talked a little bit earlier in the show how that Minnesota defense made CJ Stroud look, but I think this is a bounce back spot for Stroud and for the Houston Texans. I mean, they're coming off that loss. They are back at home, and they draw a Jacksonville team who will now be on back-to-back road games. They're coming off the short week after they got curb stomped in Buffalo on Monday night. And here's the difference. I just think that Houston is going to get pressure on Trevor Lawrence. And recently, what I've seen out of Trevor Lawrence while under pressure is not good. Meaney, we discussed it and laughed about it. He was like pulling spin moves when he didn't mean to, right? This idea that maybe it's starting to get to him. Quite frankly, I think Lawrence is a little shook, but here are the stats to back it up. The Houston Texans defense have the second highest pressure rate in the NFL. They get pressure on 42% of quarterback dropbacks. They're tied for second in kind of the adjusted sack rate. So you put it all together, it's a lot of numbers. They get pressure on the quarterback. Here's the other thing. Jacksonville gives up pressure to the quarterback. Trevor Lawrence has been under pressure a ton. Trevor Lawrence is under pressure in 40% of his dropbacks. That is third highest in the NFL. And like we said, it doesn't look like he's able to stand and deliver from the pocket. He is missing guys. He's trying to extend plays in odd ways. And I just talked about earlier in the show, Anthony Richardson going under his completions and that his completion rate was under 50%. You know who's second worst in the NFL? It's these Jacksonville Jaguars at only 53%. I think Houston is going to look better. They're going to bounce back on offense. And quite frankly, if the Houston Texans are up in this game and can pin their ears back and rush Trevor Lawrence, I think that is a recipe for disaster in this game. I think the Texans can win this game by a touchdown plus. And if you want to go a little cute, if you want to have something a little cheeky here, what I'm talking about is Houston being up in this game, getting pressure, and Trevor Lawrence not being able to handle it. How about the Houston Texans defensive touchdown at around 7-1? I saw it at plus 650 in places. It could be around 7-1 in others. And I just think there is a recipe for a lot of pressure on Lawrence, poor decisions, the sack fumbles of the world. I could see the Texans being worth a sprinkle to score on defense in this one as well.
I dig it. It has not been good for Trevor Lawrence, that's for sure. Rough go. And as you mentioned, great statistics there in terms of the pressure on both sides. And T-Law does look shook. That spin move, I was like, what is he doing? It's like something I would maybe do in Madden. It's just like, I'm just spinning in the pocket here and seeing if I can.
There ain't no such things as halfway crooks, Meaney.
Well done. So here's the look at the week 4 schedule. As I said, maybe try to find some dogs. You know, I can start here with Tampa. I feel like we're kind of all on Tampa. We were certainly on Tampa Bay a couple weeks ago, right, Choudhury, when it was like 7.5 when they played the Lions and they just straight up won that football game. So last night I put in Bucks at plus 2.5. We all chatted before we got going about this number and we expected some movement. And now I'm live looking and I'm seeing 2, 1.5 in certain spots. And I do expect this to flip as we, get closer to Friday. Is a big day for practice reports. No Lane Johnson, no AJ Brown, no Devontae Smith. That was a rough game in New Orleans for both teams. The Saints lost several players. The Eagles, it looks like they lost some players as well. So with them on bye next week, I don't think they'll push AJ Brown. There's a possibility Lane Johnson could play. Obviously, he's a big part of the offensive line. He's been one of the best in football in terms of just eliminating pressure. Doesn't allow a quarterback or an edge rusher or anybody to get to Jalen Hurts. He's been one of the best over the past couple of years. So if they're down him on top of AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, who's going to step up outside of Dallas Goedert? It's going to be a whole lot of Saquon Barkley, and he could do enough to keep them in this game. But on the other side, this was a matchup last year that we saw in the playoffs where the Bucs just straight up dominated the Eagles and Todd Bowles blitz city, and there was no AJ Brown in that game either. So I think that the Eagles are in trouble this week. So Tampa, you can get them right now at plus 110 is the best number I'm seeing over at Bet365. So I'm in on Tampa. Sam, we'll keep this board up. Is there a dog that you like? You see a potential upset here. Where would you go?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to call a plus 2.5 a dog, but this was originally at 3. But the Rams over the Bears, I think the 2.5 line is a lot more accurate. I mean, should the Chicago Bears team be 3-point favorites against anyone? I don't think so. We were talking about the Colts. I mean, the Bears offense looked just as bad. Caleb Williams had a huge day through the air, but we want to pick on this Colts defense for a reason. So I don't want to take too much away from that. And the Rams defense has been terrible as well. Again, the 49ers did lose the game, but the offense was rolling against the defense. So I do think that is going to be a concern. But just looking at what Matthew Stafford did with no Cooper Kupp, no Puka Nacua, it was just Kyren Williams and Matthew Stafford. They were able to stay competitive. And even with the banged up guys for the 49ers, I think they're tiers and tiers above the Chicago team. I don't want to say just because the Rams beat the 49ers means that they beat the Chicago Bears, but I think the Rams showed that they're not dead yet, and they are going to try and hover water until they get one of Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua, probably after the bye, but try and string together another win or so to still stay in the mix. And the Chicago team, I think they are going to probably get Keenan Allen back, but the run game has been awful. Their defense has really been carrying the team. Again, I think the Rams offense can sort of hold their own even against a tough defense. And even though the Rams defense is pretty bad, I don't know how much Chicago's offense is really going to be able to take advantage of that. So I think it is going to be a close game of the wire. And it's definitely one where I can see the Rams upsetting here in week 4.
Yeah, Stafford was fantastic last week, and Kyren Williams with the hat trick's been phenomenal as well. 3 touchdowns on the ground. The Chicago offensive line, I thought it was good. It was good last year. at least down the stretch, it has not been good. I think that's part of why they have gotten nothing on the ground. And I wouldn't go to DeAndre Swift in fantasy. I think Roshan Johnson is knocking on the door there. And Caleb Williams, second in the NFL in pass attempts, probably not the recipe for success in Chicago. Dane, do you have a dog that you like here? There's a lot of 2.5s out there, that's for sure. So
Yeah.
We can count those as dogs if we want. Why not?
Okay, well, I'm gonna take a 3.5. There's two 3.5s out there that I'm intrigued by. One is this Washington Commanders team going into the desert to see the Cardinals. You see it at 3.5. We've been talking about it, right? Jaden Daniels and this offense is all the buzz, the completion percentage, the no punts, the no turnovers. And going into this season, we always said Arizona Cardinal games are going to be fun. I think the Washington-Arizona total is at 50.5. I think it is the highest on the board this week. So this one profiles to me as like last team with the ball. I don't think any team is going to really get a 2-touchdown lead necessarily in this one. This could be a last-second field goal, last possession kind of game. And this Washington offense right now is just so efficient, and I don't see the Arizona Cardinals really being the kind of defense that's going to slow them down. So maybe they don't win outright, but I think Washington can stay within the number, stay in a kind of close game that is a little bit back and forth. I'm also intrigued, guys, by the Seattle Seahawks on Monday Night Football, getting 3.5. You know, Seattle has been something of a surprise. And I know we talked about the difference of the Lions home and away and all that stuff in the dome. They will be home. They will be indoors for this one. But Jared Goff has not been great, even at home indoors so far this season. I actually think we're going to see more and more of this quote unquote Ryan Grubb offense be good. You know, they had some tough defensive matchups early in the season with teams like Denver on the road in New England. I think we're going to see a little bit more. And this also profiles to me to be a kind of back and forth, maybe a one possession, last team with the ball kind of game. So give me 3.5 for Washington and Seattle on Monday night.
Yeah, I was looking at some props, and some of those guys in the game are there's high numbers. Of course, DK's been great over the last 2 weeks. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson was quiet last week, so we're getting a little bit of a better number on him at 40 receiving yards. It's another guy that only takes 1 or 2 catches. We've already seen a couple 40-yard catches from him this season. You're right, Dane. We talked a lot in the offseason on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. By the way, we're on there from Monday to Friday. From 1 to 3 on channel 87 about Ryan Grubb and the offense and the new look offense. JSN was talking it up in the offseason as well. A lot of teams now running motion. That's certainly one of them. And Detroit's secondary has not been on point, among the leaders in allowing receiving yards to wide receivers. So that game could shoot out. Geno Smith is a lot up at the top of a lot of important statistics over at StatsHub in terms of just like straight up accuracy, on the ball throws, some highlight throws as well. So he's been pretty good. And I think they'll lean on him too, because what we're seeing is Detroit's run defense is strong and teams are just throwing on them. Right. And that's kind of baked into some of the numbers, but I do like that call. For Survivor, if you're still hanging around, you probably don't need us. You've avoided some landmines over the past couple of weeks. That's for sure. I'm going to be too cute here. Got the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't care if it's a divisional game or that it's on the road. They're 7.5-point favorites. Yeah, just give me the Kansas City Chiefs there, as you see, guys. The 7.5. Yes, you agree, right? We don't even know about Herbert. Kansas City's offense has been, but they're still 3-0, right? And that's what I love about Mahomes. After they beat the Falcons, it's not like, oh, we're 3-0 and, big W. It's just like, man, we were awful. We got to clean this up. We got to clean that up. Got to figure out some things with Travis Kelce. Xavier Worthy only has, 6 catches in 3 games after 2 touchdowns and 3 touches in week 1. So there's still a lot for them to clean up. Of course, adjusting without Isaiah Pacheco, getting Kareem Hunt, but you guys are with me. Just take the Chiefs because the biggest favorite every week, Sam, has lost. Week 1, week 2, week 3. The biggest favorite on the board has just straight up lost. Sam, do you think that the Chiefs lose in LA this week?
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. It's also not even just a one big favorite losing. I mean, how many just 6.5-point favorites have we had lose just this season? I mean, we're going to week 4. Week 4 starts tonight, and these massive favorites just losing outright, which it's insane to think about. But I'm with you. I feel pretty good about the Chiefs. I would say that if Justin Herbert is in, I would go with the Jets as my pick. But if Justin Herbert is out, I would be fine riding with the Chiefs. I don't think you've probably used Jets in your survivor if you're still alive. So that would be my number one pick if Herbert's ruled in. If not, yeah, just ride with the Chiefs.
Yeah, Dane, you on the Jets as well. It's a pretty good one. Home favorites at 7.5.
I do like the Jets. I do like Kansas City. I do like Houston. Remember, I was laying the points with Houston as well, but you took the words right out of my mouth. If you threw to me first, Meaney, I was going to say, I don't like division games. I don't like road teams, but screw all that. I'm taking the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Because, here's the thing. The Chiefs are also, and I want to get people in the right mindset about this. I understand the Chiefs are one of those teams that you might, in most survivor pools, want to save for later in the season. But to our point, with all the chaos that's going on, I ain't saving anybody right now. I'm just trying to get to the next week, and these guys talked about it, right? We don't know about Herbert, but the other part is we do know Derwin James, the all-pro safety, is going to be suspended for this game, and not one, but both of the tackles for the Chargers are likely going to be out in Slater and Joe Alt, the number 5 overall pick, who has been really good early on. So imagine a potentially compromised high ankle sprain Justin Herbert with backup tackles on both sides, right? I also think that's cause for pause for someone like J.K. Dobbins, who has been amazing so far early in the season, and he will not have both of his tackles and may get game scripted out of this game. And if it's Tyler Heineke, that's even worse. So don't save the Chiefs. Use the Chiefs this week. But I like what Sam's saying. I think the Jets and the Texans are also options.
Yeah, Jets are probably the safer play, just given the fact that they're at home against a rookie quarterback in the defense. But as of 5 hours ago, the Chargers are likely without Justin Herbert, definitely Derwin James, Joe Alt, Rashawn Slater, and Joey Bosa. Those are 5 very key players to be without. And we'll see Tyler Heineke potentially under center. Hey, I know where you got your name from, Mr. Nice Guy. Look at this. Just so nice. Throwing hearts our way here.
Very nice.
On the NFL Betting Show. We do appreciate you guys. You're watching the replay. Reach out to Sam Choudhury, Dane Martinez, myself here. We are available, always circling back on these videos to answer any questions that you have in the comment section, whether it's start or sit or betting advice. You want to sign up, be part of the family, check out ftnfantasy.com/pricing. We have the Discord channel. You get to get picks from everybody across all sports, the NFL betting model. By the way, I meant to bring up when I was bringing up the Bucks, I'm seeing the biggest edge in our NFL betting model, which has been on point. Anything like around 8% has been fantastic. I'm seeing a couple edges, and the one that is the strongest edge is the Bucks. The Bucks on the spread, which we alluded to a little bit earlier on as well. So from Choudhury, Martinez, myself, Chris Meaney, appreciate you guys taking the time to hang out. Let the winners be yours, and we will chat to you guys next week. Peace.